Welcome to the Waiting List podcast. Tell us a story.
It's like many things you start building from scratch.
And then I'm like, wait, I really do like watches because
you've seen so many watches that makes you excited.
Yeah, I think I really do like watches.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to see if you are a watch enthusiast.
Welcome everybody to this exclusive episode of the Waiting List podcast. You're joined with me and my co-host Daniel.
Hi everybody.
And Lung Lung.
Hi.
Okay, there's no other way to put it, but we are joined with the coolest collector in town, with my good friend at WatchMadMac on his Instagram handle. And I'd like to say thank you very much for being with us here today, and it's such an honor.
Thank you, Alex, and likewise Lung Lung and Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here.
I personally want to add to that and say I haven't met you very long. I came to Hong Kong during this virus period, and fortunately or unfortunately, I've stayed here and I've met you a few times. And you're one person that has really struck me as someone I would love to follow and aspire to be like professionally and personally. Every time I've met you, you've not deliberately, but I've learned something from you. And I think that's like I would take away. It's unfortunate I have to leave eventually, but I just want to put it up there that you're someone that I regard very highly.
Oh, well, thank you, Daniel. You're going to make me blush now.
He's blushing.
Like he's gone red now.
A bit red. But, I'm not sure it's entirely deserved, but I do. I very much.
It's the alcohol.
The
The alcohol's right next to you,
Yeah, exactly.
which is well prepared.
Give him another glass.
Well, with that kind of an intro, there's no way we can fit this episode into one. So this is going to be a two-part special, which I am going to be very looking forward to. Before we talk about your collections, though, Mac, can you share a little bit about what you do in Hong Kong?
Yeah, sure, Alex. I moved here 5 years ago. Moved from the UK with a purpose to set up an office here in Hong Kong for one of the big global finance houses. So it's been an interesting journey, and it's very interesting times, of course, to be here in Hong Kong, and times which I am thoroughly enjoying on many, many different levels, both personal and professional.
So could you share a little bit about what you do for work-wise as well?
Sure. We're an asset management company. My background is more. I'm not an investor. I'm not a portfolio manager. So I look after the business side of things. And we started from the ground up with no people on the ground here, through to building a team out. And then over the last couple of years, also building a team out in Shanghai.
How long have you been out here for? And you're obviously not from Hong Kong. How was that decision to come to Hong Kong?
Sure. I've been with my company for over 20 years. So the grey hairs testify to that. But the
stylish. Stylish.
Thank you,
George Clooney. George Clooney.
I'll take that one as well, Daniel. But
Daniel's on a roll today.
I guess there's a number of factors which perhaps contributed to me being tapped on the shoulder, but it's not my first time in Asia. I was born in Asia. I was born in Singapore. I grew up in Singapore. I'm one of those typical expat brats who was thrown on an aeroplane by his parents and told to go away back to the UK for months at a time before coming back out for holidays. So, in that respect, there's some interesting conversations we could have around Singapore versus Hong Kong, of course, and the attractions of either, and I'm sure we can maybe touch on that later. But for me, bookending my adult life in terms of working terms with, maturing in Singapore, growing up as a teenager in Singapore, just ahead of going off to university. And then here I am at this stage in my career, being able to spend time back out in Asia is a revelation to me.
Because I know you had to develop the team from scratch here. Now we come across a lot of leaders, and you are a leader. So we would very much like to hear what are your secrets and what are things that you would say are important as leadership skills.
I'm not sure there's, everybody is different. I think that's one thing. And I think there are cultural aspects to this which will influence the style of leadership that you bring to the table and how you do that. And I think a degree of empathy is really important. So understanding some of that culture, being pretty humble about your capabilities as well. It's particularly if you're moving into a new climate, a new jurisdiction, a new culture, is being humble about your abilities and not coming in with assumptions about my self-worth or capabilities, but being prepared to have an open door and listen and hear what your staff say and think about how you might adapt your own personal style as well. So coming without preconceptions is really important from a leadership perspective. I'm very focused on that. Whether I deliver it or not is another question entirely, but I'm clear in my mind about what I aspire to do. I do think with building a team, you have to lead by example. There is an extent of the culture and the values that you espouse as a person, hopefully are consistent with the ones that you're looking to espouse on behalf of the company. And perhaps after the length of time I've been there and with the company, that there is an alignment, if you like, of cultural values that I can exhibit on behalf of the company. And therefore I see myself as both a mentor, a role model, and somebody who is there on behalf of the company to try and to build the I'm not going to say build the brand. That's kind of wrong. I don't like that particularly, but I think very much try and exhibit by way of leadership the sorts of values that as a company we like to be thought of.
Do you think that leaders can be, you're born with it, you already have some of those natural traits within you, and there's some people that perhaps may not be leaders? Because I do think, yes, you've touched on the point of being humble, which we've interviewed a few people now, and they all have this trait. They're quite humble. Mm-hmm. They're all kind of aware of their capabilities. But then, like, courage and having guts to do stuff, having the ability to take on responsibility, are these traits that you think can be developed or not?
You're touching on areas of human psychology of which I know very little, to be honest. So it's interesting. For all I started out at university doing psychology, and it's a topic that interests me greatly. It's not something I particularly know. So learned as opposed to inbuilt behavior. So is really what we're talking about. So I think it's within every person's capacity to learn behaviors. So, I do think you can develop skills. I very much believe that.
For our younger listeners, right, who are probably earlier on in their career path, do you think it is very important to choose companies to work for that align with their values? Or do you go into a big company and then you kind of learn that culture and then you jump when you realize, hey, I don't think this is the right company for me?
I love that question. Yeah. That's a great question, Lung Lung. I think let me start by saying I think it's really important to test yourself.
All right.
And so how can you best test yourself? To me, you can best test yourself by putting yourself in situations where you're uncomfortable.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
So if you do that, then, and if we accept that as a premise, then logically you are going to open your eyes to the possibility of working somewhere which doesn't necessarily align itself to your personal cultural values or what you perceive to be, because there's another interesting thread that we could develop on this discussion, which is how locked into you or how informed or how evolved are you in your own thinking about what your values are. Yeah. And we can, this is really interesting because it correlates and moves us straight into watch collecting as well and the journeys that we go on as watch collectors. So for me, I'm a great believer in taking yourself out of comfort zones on occasion. Yeah. It was amazing. If I think back to when I got tapped on the shoulder and asked if I'd move out here from, a senior role, doing a job which I was very comfortable with a large team of people under me. And I said, it didn't take me long to decide that the decision, it just instantly felt right to me as a direction I was prepared to take and do something different. Right. But the number of people and colleagues who came up to me and said, oh, you're so brave. I can't believe you're doing this.
They look at you
You're
differently.
mad. And they look at you and you think you're completely nuts. And I said, well, why? And said, who wouldn't take this opportunity? If you don't extend yourself and don't give yourself an opportunity to be challenged,
Right.
then you don't have the yin and the yang. You know, you got to, maybe that's the wrong, I mean, for your audience, maybe misquoting my analogies here, but you've got to have black with white, you've got to have the rough with the smooth, whatever analogy you choose. It's only by having one thing that you can have the other.
That's great. Yeah. I believe in that philosophy. Like, for me, it's anytime you feel like life is too comfortable, you're probably not doing enough. Like, you just got to pivot and do something else. Yeah.
You've stopped growing.
Isn't that basically on the borderline of, you know, order and chaos? So you're trying to find that fine line of how to make things within testing limits.
Yeah, and you'll get it wrong.
Right, of course.
And you'll make bad decisions, and you'll make decisions that are wrong, and you'll upset people, you'll get things wrong with your staff, or you'll make decisions from a business perspective that may be wrong. And again, this is a brilliant segue, and you know, it is so true also of watch collecting as well. So you know, there is an element of it in both spheres of life in terms of the journey that you go on. That the safe options, you buy your Rolex Submariner, you buy your AP, or you buy your whatever it might be.
5711.
Just for Lung Lung's benefit, you buy your 5711.
Your Daytonas and your
it's so yeah.
It's a great one. And how? So then, I'd like to understand more, because you identify people's strengths and weaknesses. So how do you balance between kind of working on someone's strengths and someone's weaknesses for you, for the corporation itself? Because you kind of want it to be balanced, right?
Yeah.
So you want them to be tested, so they improve on their weaknesses, I'm assuming?
Yeah,
but again, you don't want to put them where they might jeopardize potentially the work itself.
No, I think there's, you know, I've talked about humility. I think there's two other watchwords that I would also reference in terms of the values that, on a personal level, I feel are very important to me. You've got to be careful with this, because words are very easy to throw out there, and actually then living the example that those words mean is always a lot more challenging and testing. And so, you know, I've talked about humility. As you know, it's taken you a long time to get me to agree to do this, so it's not my natural home or environment, perhaps. But integrity. But the third one, to answer your question, is conviction. So I'm a strong believer in conviction. Now, what do I mean by that? There's personal conviction in terms of you're making decisions, and your decisions are often being made on the basis of facts that you learn. Now, of course, it's so much easier. The internet, search engines and everything. And again, if I draw parallels to the journeys that we go on as watch collectors, you go back 20, 30 years, and it was very difficult to glean information, to acquire that information in the form of fact to make decisions. But if we think about it in the work context, we're making decisions based on information that we glean from some medium or another. And then what is the point at which you're comfortable to execute on the basis of a sufficiency of information that you receive? So conviction is about having the conviction in your staff that they will do a job for you. Having the conviction in myself or leaders around you or whomever it might be that they will execute on decisions. And it may be decisions based upon imperfect information. And those that imperfect information might result in you making mistakes. So what you're trying to do is narrow the gap, the information source gap, if you like. So do you get to a point where you've got the highest rate of conviction in the execution of the whatever it is you're doing, manufacturing widgets or placing a trade or whatever it is, but accepting that mistakes will get made. And for me, it comes right back to recruitment. It's if you can recruit people, the right people well, and you're thorough and certain about your process, and you do that job well, then you got a period in which you're trying to train them up and mentor them, to use your words, and build their understanding of us as a business and the ethic that we want to display and the culture that we want to display and the objectives and outcomes that we want to achieve. But then you have to let go and empower them and let them. So what I'm trying to do is imbue staff with the conviction to make decisions. So it's about personal conviction and it's about empowering staff or people around you. They might not work for me, but it's about empowering people around you to feel that they have a sufficiency of data in an imperfect world that allows them to make decisions.
Because with that imperfect, like finding the data source, I said before that I think around 90% of the world's information on the internet has come around in the last 2 years. So what is the skill necessary to kind of siphon what is good and valuable information and what is just trash?
You're into a whole world of AI now, and we could talk AI, and there's all sorts of things. So how do you filter is effectively? So you're applying filtration mechanisms around data to try and siphon and feed it and funnel it down into quality information to allow you to make decisions. And there's, I suspect that this is a topic on which we could have a whole separate discussion. But I think it's an interesting question in a work context because, if again, to bring it to watch collecting, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, Alex. Is you're trying to filter information
from the sources. So this is the point that I have to talk about, because every time Mac and I meet up and we talk about business,
I know where this is going.
We always sometimes we have like a business partner involved and we spend 30 minutes just talking about watches and we have to make several apologies.
I'm sure it's not that long.
Last time he goes, okay, Alex, I've only got 45 minutes. And I looked at the time and we went 30 minutes through. So I was like, okay, we'll have to meet up again. It's like,
that's
working.
Me in trouble now. I have a boss as well,
The thing is like, if you bring it back to watches, Mac just keeps talking about watches. Like, he's really happy to postpone everybody else, right? He can't leave the table.
There's a time and a place, and you're right, Daniel. I could talk watches all day. Absolutely.
But do you get any hints from what that person's about with the watch he or she wears?
No.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely not. I mean, of all the questions you probably can and or have asked me, this is one that I would really strongly push back on, because, I mean, as I think you probably have a sense from my own collection, such as it is, there's a watch piece out there for everybody, and why am I to judge why you choose the watch that you put on your wrist? What gives me any right to do that? So that I bristle slightly at that. I can feel the hairs on my neck almost at the question. And it's not, I'm not having a go at you, Alice. It's a great question, which I think deserves to be asked and needs to be answered, because
it needs to be heard, to be honest.
And it needs to be heard because whether we talk specific examples of watches or not later, but I definitely feel that for me, horology is about diversity, and it's about diversity of choice. It's about diversity of models. And the world would be a boring, horrible, awful place if we were all wearing the same watch. We won't talk about Cortez shoes or anything, will we, Alex? So I very much try not to judge people. As humans, we're guilty of doing that. We all do that all the time. It's inbuilt. It's inherent. Come back to learn.
Yeah, but I think that's part of what you said before. Like, you are a role model in the watch collecting world when people meet you, for sure, and your collection gives other people the conviction to make choices of, actually, I like this piece that other people may not like, but I really like it. And this person, he's got a lot of pieces ranging from the Casio G-Shocks all the way to Pateks. So it's okay. It's okay for me to do that.
Absolutely. And more than okay, I think it's so important. I genuinely believe that the journey of collecting is all about experimentation, is about making mistakes, is being burnt. It's so easy can I name plug somebody today?
Yeah.
And I was reading the second edition of the Blackbird Watch Manual this morning, lying by the pool in the sun. It was hot out there, and rereading it, and there was a piece, and it talked about, you make the mistakes, and it's really interesting conversation about. And specifically, they were talking about one particular watch and a particular model, and I'm not going to name it, and how the fit of it on a lot of Asian wrists doesn't quite work, and in different sizes. But people are still predisposed and desperate to have that. So there's an acquisition syndrome where they go out and they want a particular watch because they see other people wearing it, or they aspire. It's a trophy piece. And then they actually find that it doesn't quite work. Crikey, I made that mistake many, many a time.
Yeah.
Can you just say what the watch is? I'm curious now. What watch is that?
It's a watch and a brand I love. It's AP, the Royal Oaks.
Let me guess. The offshores, I'm assuming.
Well, no, I'm actually even going to talk 41 mil versus 39 versus 37. And there are people who've try on those watches, and they're brilliant watches, and they're iconic. And I have them, a number of them. And you know how much I also love the brand, but they fit my wrist and they work for me on many different levels, but they're not that doesn't mean to say they're necessarily going to work for everybody else on their wrist and size and so forth. So falling into the traps of just following fashion is a journey and a mistake we all make, for sure.
Maybe is that because, like you mentioned, the knowledge is very hard to siphon, and when new collectors, they look at the billboards, they look at the advertisements about, so they just kind of focus on, okay, that looks good, that's what I want.
Well, I think it's more like, the hot pieces from big brands, you get to see a lot more of them. And when we're talking about some of these other pieces that Mac has got, you don't see them, and if you don't see them, you can't really then go and want one, right? You have to get exposed to it somehow.
That's a great point.
But sorry to cut you off. I think a lot of it's to do with validation, right? A lot of people are buying these pieces because they need to be validated. I need that ticket into getting into that, getting my foot into that door. There's very little people that I would truly say are real watch lovers, collectors, lovers.
On that point, because you mentioned validation, I think it's very clear you also say what you mean by validation. Yeah. Because I know what you mean, but I'm not sure the whole audience. You need to clarify that.
Well, okay. I hate to generalize here, right? But we're talking about 15202s, 5711s. Okay, see, this is the thing. Whenever I see a 5711, which I did yesterday in rose gold as well, I'm still I'm still in awe. I'll still take a photo of it and I'll still say this dial is beautiful. But what actually annoys me is when you speak about the watch without having any concrete reasoning of why you're getting it. Yeah, appreciation. If you tell me I wear this watch on a day that I'm dressed down, on a day I go to the beach, whatever, you have a specific reason for having that piece and you enjoy it and you wear it with confidence instead of just kind of brushing over the reason why you have it and then playing up why it's the best watch in comparison to some of the better movements, then I'm like, maybe you don't really know why you bought that watch.
Is that wrong?
It is not wrong.
I mean, I'm not saying I disagree with you, Lung Lung, because we're going back to this journey and the evolution of one's own taste and knowledge, and it's the same with buying art, or whatever. I mean, or buying wine. I mean, you buy wines because somebody tells you, that first class growth Bordeaux is you need to have that. It's fantastic, but actually a second class growth Bordeaux can be just as good and a fraction of the price, and actually you get a lot more satisfaction out of drinking it because you don't attribute a value to it, which makes you set it on a pedestal. And we've all seen, I think, probably in the watch world, prices going through the roof in recent times. Obviously now with the global situation, things have backed off a little bit, and rightly so, but the hyperbole attaching to certain pieces has been pretty staggering. And so, but I'm reluctant about this point of judging, and I do agree with you, and I think the word validation is so important. Sorry, Alex, crack in.
No, I think that's the most difficult topic because we can't prejudge.
Exactly.
So we can't. So whatever you're wearing, we can't judge you. And at the end of the day, is that person spending his own money, so he can do whatever he likes. So we're sitting in a spot where we're trying to siphon something which is on both ends very difficult to manage.
I handle a lot of watch communities, and I've come across a lot of watch collectors. I'm sure Mac has as well through his years of collecting. And what I think is it's a different way of collecting. Yeah, and everybody has a different philosophy on collecting. And you have to respect that. Yeah, it might not be you. It's like we talk about wines, I like maybe Bordeaux or I like white wine, right? But it's still wine, right? Mm-hmm. And part of, for me, is the meeting the people behind these people that collect these things. I think they have a fantastic story. If they do buy, because it's the latest thing, whatever, I still get to see the latest thing. Yep. I still get excited about it. Yes, I wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
But then, we go back to that point. If everybody was like me, it'd be pretty boring.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the point is, why we respect Mac a lot is because you're someone that does collect everything, but you also know a lot. So we give you more respect because of that. Let's say if you're just collecting randomly without much knowledge, then we might look at you from a different light, per se.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, but that's the result of 25 plus years of
that's exactly
making mistakes, Alex, isn't it? So
that is the point, though, because I think we all started looking at a watch, not knowing what it was, and thought, this is cool, I'll buy it. Not knowing a lot. You have to start somewhere.
Okay,
right?
then that brings us to the perfect point then. So we need to know about your first days of your collecting game. Yeah, so how did you start?
Yeah, right. Hang on. I've got to start counting my fingers.
No, we have to use that Harry Potter thing of shifting back.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a long time ago, and actually, this is going to instantly give away my approximate age. Not that you guys don't know it, but for our listeners out there, it probably means that they can pinpoint me pretty accurately. I actually vividly remember it, and I still have the watch. In fact, I was having a little look for it. The first couple of watches that were significant on my journey, I still have, and my father gave me for my 13th birthday a Seiko LCD, LCD, not LED, an LCD. No, it wasn't a calculator watch. It's like and I was trying to see if I could find it, but it's like in storage. It's in storage back in the UK, so I don't have it here with me, sadly. And whether it even worked now or not, I don't know. But the point is, I still have it. So, and that was, I suppose, a landmark moment where I thought, I'm growing up. My dad's seen fit to buy me a watch, and it's significant and it's quite cool watch back then. Actually, such as the way retro is these days. What
was it made out of?
It's a bit like the Pulsar, the re-edition.
It's still metal.
That's cool.
Yeah,
stainless steel.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a good idea now. Probably a beautiful bracelet on that.
Really nice bracelet on it as well. And I still have it. And it was I suppose that was a moment where you suddenly thought. So that was obviously in the 70s. There we go, listeners. You've got it now. And that was my 13th birthday. And then let's roll forward a little bit. The next, I suppose, one that was significant, Alex, was the first paycheck watch. Maybe not the first paycheck. Actually, it was more like the first inland revenue rebate, tax rebate. So, I often wonder. We talk about mistakes here. This is an interesting thought. Rather than buying this watch I bought with that tax rebate, if I'd invested that in the FTSE 100 or the S&P 500 on a track or something, what would the value of that be now?
Several million.
Versus the value of that watch I then bought. I think I probably made maybe the wrong decision. But anyway, the story is I still have that particular piece as well. It's a Longines. It was a quartz. And I still have quartz. Let's just be clear. I still have quartz watches in my collection. I think they have a place. So maybe that's a separate thread for later. But it was a Longines quartz, and I remember the conversation I had with a chap who I'm still friends with now, and he's retired now from retail. But I remember the piece of advice because I was weighing up some. I suppose I should name it, shouldn't I? Some
Say
sort
it,
of
say it.
trendy Gucci with the red and green strap on it, and the dial and the corks.
We don't judge.
And
we don't judge.
So all those ideas you have about me, Daniel, they've gone out the window now. Would you like to rewind this and just start
And
again?
is that including like the Armani watches as well?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like some sort
we
of
cut that out.
super yeah, exactly. super trendy as a time, or so I thought. Gucci watch, and the guy and this friend said to me, and I was looking at this Longines, and it was two-tone, it was quartz, but it was more elegant, and it was a lot more, in some respects, timeless. And again, sadly, because I was trying to see if I could find it, I don't have it. It's back in the UK in storage. But he was right. It was the first sort of bit of validation or input or factual input, pre-internet, of course, that I was looking to somebody to steer me on that journey, and he was right. Of course, it was 34 mil or something. Certainly don't wear it anymore, but I'm never going to get rid of it.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
Because it's a moment,
Yeah.
isn't it? So it's kind of like a moment.
So hang on, we're talking about the Gucci here. We're talking about the Longines.
I bought the Longines.
Let's make that clear.
Can we just say Longines is going through a fantastic resurgence of
Yeah.
some of the pieces they're coming out with right now out of their heritage book and so forth, which is another whole conversation around heritage models. That
We saw one actually
probably should
recently.
Yeah.
Steph from Revolution. She had
Stephanie,
the column wheel. Was that Limburg one?
Yeah,
you've seen
Charles
that one,
Lindbergh
and
one.
it's like a
Yeah.
small. I've never actually seen that piece in real. That was the first time I've
Yeah,
seen it. 'Cause
I haven't
always thought
seen it
would
on
be
the
a big
wrist actually,
piece.
but
It's
not.
beautiful because
Yeah.
it's got these blue, little kind of like indices on the bezel. It's just a lovely hint.
I need to go and see some of these in the flesh because I haven't seen
Yeah, it's
some
really
of the more
nice.
recent edition
Yeah, it's
pieces.
really nice.
But yeah, I need to do that. So there you go, Alex.
Okay.
That's two sort of history moments from a few years ago.
Not too long ago, because you are one of the rarest collectors, because we have to go back onto this point where you do collect the full spectrum of watches. So we begin with like big brands, complications, independence, and I'm going to prejudge even Hublot. I'm not sure that I should use an S with plurals with that. So how do you decide your watches?
Yeah. It's sounding as though I'm just repeating myself. We'll talk about the journey. And there is an education piece where you just spend time learning what suits you, and you make these mistakes along the way. I'm comfortable now with where I am in terms of what I buy and why I buy it. And I don't feel that I need to buy pieces because I'm looking for validation, back to Lung Lung's point, because I feel like, well, I'm pretty insignificant anyway when it comes to collecting. In terms, I am, and here in Hong Kong, we actually, as a sidebar here, one of the most fantastic things I've had the experience of in the last 5 years of moving here is the greater exposure to amazing watch collectors and the ability to converse and talk to people. So I feel, even after 25 years, that my knowledge has improved so much over that 5-year period that I've got a lot to be grateful to for people round about me over here as well who've helped me on that journey of self-discovery. That sounds so new age hippie, doesn't it? So for benefit of listeners, I'm not a new age hippie. So I buy for myself. I'm comfortable about what I'm looking to buy. And I'm really interested in the history of horology more generally and the different phases of the evolution of the industry. So we've talked already about the quartz crisis, but what listeners, of course, many will know much better than I about the impact of the quartz crisis was how many manufacturers folded during that period. And you then look at, and you called out Hublot. And yeah, I mean, you know how much I love AP and Royal Oaks and offshores, and not just, by the way, Royal Oaks and offshores, because AP is so much more than just that, and that's another point that needs to be made. But when I think back to what Jean-Claude Biver did and he bought Blancpain.
20,000 Swiss francs?
Some ridiculously small sum of money in 1981, 82 or something like that, from memory,
correct.
and brought it back from the dead. And I think his strapline then that he used was since 1770, and forgive me, Blancpain and everybody who works there if I get my date wrong, but I'm going to say 1775 or 78 or something like that. Blancpain has never had a quartz watch, and Blancpain never will.
That's right.
And it was something, I'm paraphrasing maybe, but it's more or less exactly what he said.
That, yeah.
And so you look at somebody like Jean-Claude Biver and what he's done within the industry and achieved, polarizing people along that way. And actually, having just been and seen some of his pieces in the Phillips preview auction, it's just like, my God!
His own personal collection.
If only his, his personal collection is breathtaking. So, I'm not going to dismiss either a person for the watch they wear, or a brand because of what they do. Because some point, brands go through cycles, and it's a lumpy road, and there are different things that are on that road that will cause them to fall off it, or full steam ahead. And as I've just mentioned, Longines, I think they're going through a phenomenal revival at the moment. You've seen what Montblanc have done over the last few years within the Richemont group. Arguably since Jerome went from Jaeger to Jaeger LeCoultre to Montblanc, and there's a certain DNA crossover that I can see.
David Tarato as well go from Tudor over to Montblanc for the design as well. Yeah, classically designed.
Taking the Minerva movement as well.
Yeah.
That's got some punch.
That had a lot to do with it. So, sorry, this is very long-winded, Alex, isn't it? You asked me
in regards to
how do I make decisions, and what is it that informs me about pieces. So I'm trying to be a little bit more selective about what I'm buying now. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm looking to consolidate, but I'm looking to refine. And as part of that refinement, it might mean one or two pieces disappear, but it's usually in pursuit of a piece from the same brand, from the same manufacturer, that is on a higher level. And I'm not going to talk about the pieces that disappear, because one thing that I've learned is that you shouldn't really look back, but it doesn't mean to say I don't look back with a certain amount of nostalgia about some of the pieces I've let go. But if it's for the purpose of moving forward into something even more phenomenal from the same brand, then I can live with myself. Whether the brands can live with me, I don't know whether that's necessarily the case. But
it's your own personal journey, so
it's
part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you talk about consolidation, because I met you at the start of the year, and you was telling me about you was thinking of consolidating, which I was thinking it's not been very successful.
No, yeah, you're right.
I think it's something you tell the other half. I'm consolidating, but actually you're not, and you pretend some go under the bed.
Yeah, exactly. And then they just don't go home. They sit in the office in the safe in the office.
They move around, but they're actually always there.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm going to change it slightly off topic. So, because you have seen the evolution, so what brands do you think are doing a great job at the moment in time?
In answering that, you have to bring your own personal perspectives to it rather than talking from a broader industry, because there are certain brands I know better than other brands, and naturally, therefore, I can respond in a way that speaks to those brands far better. So, I mean, Alex, my big loves are AP, Jaeger LeCoultre, Patek Philippe, FP Journes. So if I had to try and identify four brands with whom I have a particular affinity, those would be the four that, for different reasons, speak to me most. But my collection transcends and goes way beyond that, through to Casio G-Shocks, through to Seiko Pressages, through to re-editions of Seikos, the SLA 17, which is a fantastic re-edition of Seiko's first diver's watch from 1965. Coincidence there, maybe, on the age front.
And you changed the strap on that as well, is that right?
I put a sort of elasticated Marine Nationale type strap on it, because it can go anywhere, do anything, and it's great. Through to Richard Mille, through to Urban Jurgensen, so independence as well as more the mainstream. But I suppose what I'm finding is that we talked about phases within the watch industry as well, the quartz, the resurgence of high horology, and the impetus for that. Then
and mobile phones coming through.
Yeah, the big brands,
conglomerates,
so Richemont,
Kering,
Kering,
Swatch.
LVMH, Swatch, and the ETA at a crisis with Swatch Group saying they wouldn't supply Ebouche to different brands, and then Swiss government stepping in from a competition commission perspective and saying, well, yeah, fine, but you've got to phase that out gradually, otherwise we're
going to
die. Back to the quartz crisis again, and we all die out. So there's different phases, but what I probably tend to be looking to finesse my collection more around now are what I would say are independents. However, one that will never go out of my collection is Jaeger LeCoultre for all sorts of reasons.
Talking about that, you've mentioned like you collect all the wide range, and I'm sure like the Casio Oaks, the Seikos, there's an appreciation of the actual watch as an instrument, where you can see, oh, you have this and it looks great and all this kind of stuff. But then there's also part of the purchasing where the brand does also pay certain influence to you. You've mentioned the JLC, AP, Patek, FP Journes. What is it about those brands that particularly resonate with you? Because that's what you mentioned just before. So I'd like to know why.
Which one do you want me to start with?
AP. Let's start with AP.
Okay, AP. Then.
Okay, AP. I bought my first AP, which is a 15300 white dial, 39mm Royal Oak, 13 years ago, maybe now. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was April 2008. I can remember.
Oh, I can remember that.
And it's been through all sorts with me. And I visited the manufacturer on several occasions. So even before I moved out here to Hong Kong, I'd been there and met with them. And I think probably since coming to Hong Kong, I've been able to develop my relationship with AP a lot more closely as a consequence of having great people on the ground here who are open to engaging with you and educating me.
So it's that personal touch.
It's a personal thing. Okay. And I think that, all brands, I mean, let's move this out of watches. Any company is only as good as the people who are representing it as the ambassadors of that company. And you get good people and you get bad people. And some people are poor ambassadors and some people are great ambassadors. But what happens is on the back of, we've talked a lot about judging and validation, but on the back of that first meeting with somebody, human nature, as I said earlier, makes it very difficult not to form an initial opinion. You might want to give the benefit of doubt to something. So your initial exposure and experiences that you have with a company, whether it be watches or hospitality or retail or whatever it might be, are going to inform your subsequent
they can make or
choices.
Make or break you, I think.
And that's obvious stuff. But so for me, I feel that some of these brands that we talk about, my personal experiences with them have been so good. And so welcoming in terms of opening their arms to me and my, pretty modest purchasing power, relatively speaking, that, it makes me want to learn more as well and just deepen those relationships.
It sounds like a very
better.
personal relationship that's you have with a brand that really is so strong now. Yeah.
Alex,
I recognise, on that point, because you've built such a strong relationship, because you and I do have a close relationship with AP.
Mm-hmm.
So on that point, I believe you was the first to pick up the remaster.
Yep.
Okay.
So I believe.
So could we question if the waiting list exists or not?
I think it probably does to some level, but I do also think, I don't think you can say black, white, yes it does, no it doesn't. I think there's a combination of factors in play that rightly will influence the way any company or brand chooses to engage with its customer base. And luxury goods is arguably quite a fragile, precarious business model because it's susceptible to the vagaries of what's happening globally around the world, far more so. And you could say the same about hospitality as well. And we're seeing that so obviously right now, of course, with events that have happened in 2020. So It's quite interesting, Alex. I'm trying to answer this in a way that doesn't lead us down a path that I probably don't want to go down, which is the impact of influencers, if I can put that in inverted commas, and how social media is now affecting brands and what it all means. But I don't think you can shy away from that conversation either. I think it's an important part of it.
I just you can finish first what you were saying.
Because about the influencers in regards to having an influence on the brands.
Yeah. And waiting lists and whether they exist or not. So I think it's about who brands want to be wearing their pieces as well. So the brands will have done an awful lot of homework. And, let's step out of AP and think about Patek for a second. Patek have just issued the 6007 blue dial, stainless steel, 1,000 piece, with to me what looks like a Curry Voutilainen dial, but it's actually sorry, I'm just going to come out and say it.
Someone call it Jaeger.
Okay, that's me.
What do you mean? What Mac means is engine turned.
Yeah, exactly.
And they haven't even done the whole dial.
Exactly.
done
exactly. So thank you, Daniel.
I'll take that for you.
It down another level, which means
I'll
that
take that
you
blow
can
for
take
you.
that one. Yeah. So I dodged a bullet. Daniel's just taken it. So, but what's interesting about that, and I'm again coming back to judging, not one to try and judge a watch until I've held it in my hands. So the remaster, as an example, is one that immediately, a bit like the Code 1159, people all over the internet were quickly giving it all sorts of a hard time.
Our mutual friends got one, right?
I know, exactly. And I just wouldn't jump in on that conversation until I'd seen it. And there are things about the Code 1159 that I think are absolutely amazing, fantastic. But there are also parts of it I don't like. Now I've had the opportunity to handle it. I've fed those observations and comments back into the senior AP team. But if I think about that newly released Patek and waitlist, non-waitlist, Patek will have done their market intelligence, their market research. They know who's buying their watches and what watches different demographics are buying. And they are looking to move away from the old fuddy-duddies like me who want to buy, perpetual calendar chronograph in some precious metal or something and build the next generation of collectors. And in order to do that, you've got to make something that is appealing and attractive at a lower price point,
accessible,
and to a younger generation. Now, whether it's accessible and whether it's a lower price point or not, we can debate that as well. 1,000 pieces, it's going to fairly it's probably all pre-sold already.
Disappear.
It's gone. It's probably gone because it's Patek. But
stainless steel Patek. Yeah.
Would you think they're over leveraging their brand name because of that?
No, no, I don't. Controversial, perhaps. You might think I'd say yes, but no, I don't, because to the point I just made, I think it's really important. And you asked me earlier, Alex, about how brands are evolving and which of the brands that I admire having over a longer period of time continuing on a particular road or a path or a journey that continues to inspire me as a collector. And I think I alluded to the fact there were bumps on that road, and the road might take turns on that journey. And I find it very difficult to identify any single brand that over a 25, 30-year time of buying watches, that at every point on that road they have been perfect, and that I haven't been critical of something or other that they've issued, or that I've thought, I'm not buying that, or I don't like the direction they're going in right now. But building trust and relationship means that you can still have a conversation with the brand about it, and then that gives me, and I think Jaeger LeCoultre is a great example of that, the opportunity to feed in at the most senior levels to the CEOs, likes and dislikes, and I hope that that's received and taken in the way it's intended.
Going back to building relationships, right? I think a lot of listeners are wondering, what do you mean by building a relationship? because especially for Asian people, we're not very good at just walking in, making small talk, and expressing how we feel.
No
So then,
Are you
basically.
saying that Mac's really good at
no,
small
no,
talk?
no, but like
Because we're good at flattering you, Mac.
at the G2G yesterday, I had a really surprising question. They said, "How do I go to AP House?" And I was like, "You just go there and press the lift and go up, right?" And they said, "Well, what do I do when I get there?" And I was like, "No, people will
hello.
take care of you."
Hello.
So I was just wondering, what do you mean by building a relationship? What do people need to understand?
I think just as you said, Linda,
Yeah.
walk in, say,
Right.
educate me, tell me about your
Mhm.
brand, tell me about your pieces, be prepared to be humble about your own knowledge.
Yeah.
And just be willing to listen and learn and ask questions.
Okay.
And, I think we've touched on social media.
Yeah.
And how that has created a learning environment and an opportunity, which you then do need to go back and we filter and figure out what's good facts and what's bad facts, and
Yeah.
how you then consolidate all that data into something that is useful to you as an individual. But I think what social media has done very well is create opportunities to educate and learn.
Mhm.
So people can do a little bit of research, but it doesn't get away from just going in and having a conversation with somebody. And
Yeah.
I like to think at all levels, I can walk into a room, whether
Yeah.
it's with
Yeah.
Kevin or Peggy or
Yeah.
whomever, or anybody in
Yeah.
AP
Yeah.
boutique, and just have a nice fun conversation with them. I
All
hope.
right. All right.
So I do encourage people to be prepared to go and seek help and
Okay.
advice on
I
it.
can
That's good
champion that as
advice.
well, because
Yeah.
I haven't got an AP, right?
Mm.
And I think out of this room, I've probably been there the most.
Yeah, I know. They say that actually, Daniel.
What about that Daniel? Is he ever going to
Do
get
you know what?
something?
Do you know, it's like, I can say the coffee's good. Right?
And the chocolates.
Yeah.
And the chocolates.
And they have nice cigars as well, and a great balcony, which you
They've
can
given me a
enjoy
loop as
smoke
well.
on.
But what I'm saying is, just got to be confident in yourself. Go there, like you say, stay humble. Go there with the attitude to learn, right? And see what happens.
But in building the relationship, if you're going to go in and say, I want a 15202 IP, they're going to look at you and say, no, you're mad. We're going to have to give that one to Alex.
I knew Mac would use
No
this
comment.
podcast to help his
Mate.
allocation.
Mate, I had to get that one out there, didn't I? There's just no way I was
Make a
going
pop on me.
no way I was
Like-
going to let that
Well,
one
actually,
go.
no, I want to make it absolutely clear. Look, Mac and I are looking for a particular piece.
Yeah.
We know what is coming, and I said to Mac, "Look, I feel sorry for you. I'll let you have it first."
Oh yeah, it's so kind of you. No, I know it's. But if you go in and you're looking for one of the most sought after pieces, I mean, it's like can you walk into a Rolex boutique here in Hong Kong and buy a retail price a Submariner? No, you can't. And you're not going to be able to do so unless you have a fantastic relationship. So you have to go on a journey in building that relationship. Now, this is a contract that you're engaging in effectively with a brand, with the person on the other side. And it's me saying, I'm prepared to have a long relationship with you and go on a journey and buy pieces from you so you get something out of me. In return, I'm hoping that I'll get something out of you at some point in that journey.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is it wrong?
Yeah.
But that's business.
That's right, yeah.
And whether it's an independent or whether it's one of the big four, whatever, watch conglomerate groups, they're in it to make money. So they want to think about who they're selling to. I have no problem with that at all. And they want to think about the demographics of the watch buying public who are wearing their watches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. Like, the brand cares who they're giving the watch to wear.
Yeah,
It isn't, I got money here, give it to me.
exactly.
That's a clear difference in maybe how watches are being sold these days.
Yeah.
That's the key point, I think. And actually going back to the point about 600, Alex, when you said about, like, is that good for the brand? I got to say, like, we represent a very small part of the market, probably one of the hardest parts to sell to. And a lot of the watches out there are not catered for necessarily us, right? So they don't actually, we won't buy those. But other people will. And actually those probably are like way easier to make money. And and it's more mass, right?
Well, what does Rolex sell? They sell more Datejust than anything else.
But the collectors, they all go for the ones like subs, Daytonas, right? Let's be honest, collectors are probably a bit pain in the ass, man. For brands.
We are. Well, undoubtedly we are, because we go in and smoke their cigars and drink their drinks and take their leaves and drink their coffee. And some of us, at least 4 of us in the room have one, and you don't, mate. So get out there.
But it's kind of like these purists, though. We call ourselves one of those. Yeah. It's like with the 911, right?
Yeah.
I know for sure that Porsche sells more Macans.
I thought that was another watch we were talking about. I was racking my brain, saying 911. What's that one?
No, the car itself.
I know.
So the purists talk about the 911 all the time, and anything gets changed onto it. But all that, right? Air cooled, manual gearbox,
absolutely,
naturally aspirated engine.
Yeah.
But then we know for a fact that Porsche probably sells way more Macans and Cayennes than 911s put together.
Yeah.
So all 911s put together. So in my mind, I'm thinking maybe we purists are quite annoying for the brands itself, and we're very hard to deal with.
But yes, and that's that sort of social contract that you're engaging with them. And that, on the other hand, they're looking for people who are going to be able to become ambassadors with a small a for that brand, and it creates an aspiration mentality in the public. So why do you think people buy Rolexes? Because it has an aspiration attaching to quality attaching to it. It's a fantastic watch. I've got them. It's an absolutely fantastic watch, but it's become aspirational, and there's 800, 900,000 of them produced a year or whatever it might be. But people will want to have them because of the aspiration attached.
Okay, so we have to talk about the other brands, and let's not talk about AP, but let's talk about Jaeger, because you actually have a very particular relationship with them. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, so I'm probably a little bit different insofar as I think the third watch I bought, or the second watch I bought for myself, was an Omega Speedmaster Sapphire Sandwich, Sapphire back, and the third one was a Reverso, and I was still in my 20s probably at the time, and perhaps an unusual choice to buy a Reverso. But I absolutely love the iconic design of it, and I still do. And I've had so many Reversos over the years, and still do. And it's one where the history and the story behind the watch just somehow captured my imagination. This notion of some geezer in India going to somebody and saying, I need a watch to be able to play polo on my horse so I don't smack it with my mallet. It's a little bit, it's very contrived, and it's true, but it feels somewhat contrived, and it's horribly colonial in this day and age, which is also awful. But the original sports watch, it's a bit like Cartier Santos and stuff like that, the Dumonts. The original purpose and the original storyline behind them live on to this day. So it hasn't changed much since 1931 and the first Reverso. It's still an icon now as much as it was then. So for me, as a brand, I started learning more about Jaeger. That was the first one I really felt I want to learn more about this as a brand. And I've had a number of trips to the manufacturer, and I've been invited to all sorts of bits and pieces. I've assembled and disassembled movements. I've done an enameling class, and I've made my own enamel dial.
Do you still have it? We have to see it next time.
I still have my enamel dial. And
Let us examine.
I keep threatening to them that we're going to make it into a limited edition of one.
There's some truth in that threat.
There is some truth in that. I would love to do that. I did a painting of the Matterhorn, which of course is Switzerland's iconic mountain, and Toblerone bars and everything, and even with the little Swiss flag on it. So it's actually even if I say so myself, it's pretty good. So Jaeger. So I've known and been lucky enough that I've had lunches, dinners, meetings with Jerome Lambert, who for me is did incredible things with Jaeger, and had the freedom to do incredible things with Jaeger, and then Daniel Rido, and then throughout to present day, and the lady in the industry, Catherine, who used to be in Hong Kong, by the way, who led. She was CEO for, I think it was it Van Cleef & Arpels, I think, from memory.
Okay.
I may be wrong on that, so sorry, Catherine, if I got it wrong. If you hear this, so don't strike me off. But it's been a great opportunity to learn, and there are people there. I'm going to shout out and call out Christian Laurent, who's probably been with, I think he's now served 50 years with Jaeger LeCoultre as one of their high-end watchmakers, one of the people who's developed a number of the complications and been responsible for some of the most innovative complication pieces that they've done. And then Stefan Belmont, who's been there for years, who now looks after the Heritage Gallery and so forth, and has recently been presenting in this time of COVID remotely all their new releases. So I just feel connected to them. Yeah.
And I have this thought. Do you feel like Jaeger's been not say deliberately reduced or minimized, because they've got Vacheron and also Lange in that portfolio? So do you feel like Jaeger's kind of in some way been put
limited?
Down, limited in that order? Because you mentioned about they used to be very innovative. So what was that?
We're in a different phase of Jaeger LeCoultre now. It feels to me, compared to where we were under Jérôme Lambert, I wouldn't say... I don't know whether that would be something they would agree with or not. It feels that way to me. I think they're doing brilliant pieces right now. We've just seen a release of a new piece with a new Memovox countdown alarm, blue dial, so a timer on it plus an alarm. It's a countdown timer plus an alarm. It's an incredible piece, and when Jaeger do stuff like that, they're up there with the best in the world for sure. And you look at pieces like the Duomètre and so forth. I think, to your point about where they sit within Richemont, is an interesting one, and I don't know enough, to be honest, Alex, about the inner workings of decision-making process about brand priorities, because that's what I think you're talking about, is how Mr. Rupert and the leadership team at Richemont determine the focus for all the different brands. I don't know how that works. But if you think about it, Jaeger are making a lot more watches than Lange and so on. So I don't know what the numbers are nowadays. So, and then you get a company like Roger Dubuis, which seems to be where the focus for a lot of the innovation is now in terms of materials for cases and so forth. I don't know. I honestly don't know how to answer that because I don't have enough information.
Actually, talking about Lange, do you have Lange?
No, I don't.
Yeah, what is it about that? You haven't got one. Why?
It's absolutely nothing about not liking them. I just think they are incredible. I love, the German silvering, the quality of the execution, the quality of the finishing. If I think about Lange and Söhne's influence. When did they get bought into? When did they become part of the Richemont Group? 1999, 2000, 2001. It was early 2000 or something, wasn't it? Along with Jaeger and they were all acquired as part of the Richemont Group. But if you think about the datograph, and its place in horology history, it is just wow. Incredible, and it is, as I think you guys know, from my admiration for certain people's pieces in this room, just what I think of them. I absolutely love them, but you have to have a focus to a collection, and if I had limitless amount of money, there's an awful lot of watches I'd buy.
Okay.
And a datograph would be right up there, and the Platinum Series 1 datograph for me.
It's hard.
It's not the full graph, not the full graph. Platinum.
I think personally, it's very hard to dismiss chronographs from Lange.
Exactly, correct. And the finishing quality, and when you think about chronographs in-house, boom, they did it.
So before we end this segment, so you mentioned about your Jaeger and your enamel influence potentially in the future.
Yeah.
But we had this conversation with Mark Choen, the one that he's doing at the Armory.
Oh yeah.
So you had a slight influence on that, right?
Well, it's an interesting one because I knew Mark was doing this edition with a small company in Scotland called Anordane, and there is a small watch company who are buying in the movements, and I don't know whether they do their own cases or whatever, but what they are doing, and this is the important part, is they're doing their own enamel fume dials. And they are phenomenal and absolutely brilliant. And there's two little stories here that I think are probably worth sharing, Alex. One was I bought my wife one. She didn't know it. But in the course of the purchasing of that, the conversations I had with Anordane, it became evident to me that they would print or etch on the back of the case an Ordnance Survey map of the location specific to you. So they would put a map on the back that would be down to the nearest couple of 100 meters if you wanted it, or as wide out as 25 miles or whatever on the back of the case. And it could be totally individual to you. So I, in the course of the conversation with the company, said, well, I'd like to have it of, where my wife was from. And they thought, brilliant, let's do that. They did it. And it was a fantastic surprise for my wife, totally unknown, didn't realize it was coming. But I was chatting to Mark about it, and he was commissioning another batch of the Model 1 Anordanes. And I said, well, you really should have Hong Kong or New York etched, laser engraved onto the back of your watches to make it unique and bespoke. So anyway, that's the story. He ended up doing that.
Let's help plug that brand. I mean, how much do they sell for?
1,300 sterling, something like 1,100, or it's about 11,000 Hong Kong.
Okay, so that's pretty affordable, right? So we're not talking
we're talking
about like
like
enamel dial. We're talking about
automatic,
right?
and
it's exactly. It's not quartz. It's automatic.
Yeah, you bought it today.
I bought it with me today.
It's a Seta movement.
It's a Solita movement. Solita movement. So, and Model 1, Model 2. Super nice sizing, 37 on the Model 2, 38 I think on the Model 1, and the fume dial's great. So
it is nice.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of hammer tone on it.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite tool-like in a way.
The hands are very.
I love the hands,
syringe
type.
Big watches.
No, they remind me of those things that you used to push into your iPhone.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's like the thing,
the SIM card.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, you're right.
Right?
Actually, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So if all else
fails,
you can break the crystal and use that on your iPhone, or maybe vice versa.
I had a look at them yesterday. Actually, I saw the Hong Kong one, but I think for me, the thing that makes it really interesting is every single dial is unique, because it's and the interesting thing is in Glasgow, there's a few really good art schools. So not a lot of people know that, and a lot of the students come from the art school and they make the dials. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
Glasgow
nice.
School of Art is world famous.
Yeah.
And the fume dials there, they do in all sorts of different colours as well. So
It's really cool.
Well, unfortunately, that ends this part of the segment.
All right, Alex,
I need
calm
it back.
down.
I'm really upset. I've been going for like years.
I've probably talked far too much.
No, that was
Alex,
amazing.
So sorry,
it's
but
amazing.
it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Matt, for being here. It's it's one of those rare joys where you can just sit with someone and spend hours and hours and just haven't even talked about anything really. Like there's so much more that we can keep going on.
I think amongst the three of us, there's we're very keen to learn from people, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's watch collecting or from a career self-development side of view, and that you're just somebody that just oozes all of that information for us.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and
Thank
I
you
appreciate
so
the opportunity. But it's as I say, apologies for talking for far too
we
long.
need it.
But
We need it.
it's been great fun, so appreciate it.
So thank you, viewers, for listening. We will see you very soon for part 2. So please stay tuned and hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Waiting List podcast. Hit the subscribe button and the next episode will come straight to your phone as soon as it's ready. Whilst I'm here, please remember to leave a nice review and follow us on Instagram @The Waiting List Podcast.